And we are back. We are the coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting here at the Worldwide Coalition headquarters. Of course, as always, deep in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island. If it seems like I'm even speaking more quickly than I normally do, it's because we have a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 punch on civil liberties tonight, bringing it folks directly to you who are involved in active litigation, an active focus on changing legislation, and an active focus on a direct involvement in people's day-to-day lives as to how the criminal justice and the civil justice system works here in Little Rhodey, and I would imagine similarly across the nation. Joining me again in the studio, he's now officially a frequent offender here at the Coalition, is my good friend, Dimitri Lyssikatos.
Good to
see you, buddy. So, we're taking it to the streets. Stephen laid out some of the background. What I'd like you to do, you've been on before, we talked about the project, but give people just a very brief look at the project itself, the Rhode Island Accountability Project. What are you folks about, and what are you trying to accomplish?
All right, the Rhode Island Accountability Project is basically a database of internal affairs reports, basically complaints against police departments, law enforcement officers, whatever. And it's a database basically set up so anybody can go up there and look at how their police department is handling these complaints. The reports are redacted. There are no names in the reports. Most of the locations are redacted also. But the narrative will give you a good idea of, what the complaint was, how it was handled. It lets us know how our government is operating. Basically gives us a rough idea of how they're handling themselves. We can't have any faith in the integrity of the system if we can't see what's going on.
Right. No, and I asked you this with tongue planted firmly in cheek because I know the answer, but I'd love your take on it. There's an element out there that would point to your activities or some of the auditor's activities as being just an irritant, and it's only for people who've done something wrong. And if you've done nothing wrong, then the eternal question, what do I have to worry about? Is that true?
Absolutely not. Yeah, I don't even know where to begin with that. I mean, that type of thought will only lead you to tyranny. If you don't hold your public officials accountable, sooner or later they will become fully corrupt. I mean, that's just the nature of power. And, we have to limit it. As an individual, you have to take the personal responsibility to hold your public officials accountable for their behavior. Mm-hmm. And if you don't, you become part of the problem, the apathetic.
Well, repeat that. That's a critical point. You start out with, you have to take responsibility. Repeat that.
Yeah, it's personal responsibility. That's what it's all about. I mean, who else is going to hold them accountable if you don't? Right. Do you think some random government agency is going to hold another government agency accountable? I mean, that's ludicrous. That's just not going to happen. The public itself has to do this job. As an individual, you have to take part in ensuring your own freedom.
That point is so often missed. There's a tendency to believe, well, someone else will do it.
Yeah,
because it's someone else's problem until you wake up one day. Now, you yourself, I mean, you're a regular guy?
Absolutely.
You're a business owner?
Yeah.
Active in the community? You're not you become a troublemaker. Huh. But you're not a troublemaker. You haven't led a life of crime.
Absolutely.
And so again, nothing could have ever happened to you, right? That would have said, but it has. It's really by chance. If you as an individual, you find yourself in the wrong place at the wrong time, someone impugns guilt upon you about a certain thing. It could be a mistaken identity. You could fit a prototypical mold. I have a couple young friends who are Hispanic and African American. We say in my generation, people of color, and two of them in particular kid me all the time that I get away with murder because I look like the Family Guy. I mean, there's things that I can say to people in positions of authority.
I believe there's a certain amount of truth to that.
Right? Did I look like the Family Guy? Yeah, absolutely. That I can say that I can get away with, because I'm not dropping the F-bombs. I'm using 8-syllable words, and they usually aren't mad at me until later. But I can get away with that. The average person will find themselves in circumstances clearly not of their making where bad stuff happens to good people.
It happens all the time.
And then you're in the system. So now we've got this crazy situation. You've got two Supreme Court rulings that uphold, if you will, the supply system for the information that you are acting simply, and I want to stress this, are you acting as a source of judgment on any of these people?
No. I just put it out there, and you judge for yourself. We don't judge these reports personally. They're put into the database for the average Rhode Islander to look and take a look and see what his city and town is doing. Mm-hmm. That's it.
So you are merely a disseminator.
That's right. Strictly a database
of information.
Right.
You're packaging in a way that's more easily accessible than government is.
It's almost impossible to. What we've done with the database, as an individual, it'd be almost impossible to find these reports. The amount of time it takes between putting the public request in, having a response, getting the report, sometimes that can take 3 months. You know what I mean?
Right.
And the average person, if you wanted to try to find some of this, it would take a huge amount of time, and it's expensive too. This costs us quite a bit of money. This is all grassroots. We fund this ourselves. We're going to become a nonprofit very soon, mm-hmm. which will hopefully help us gather enough money to be able to pay for some of these files and grow the database a bit more than it is now. It's very slow right now. It's just
and
very slow growth.
Right. No. So you're acting as essentially you're replacing and creating what police departments should already have in place. This is
essentially. I mean, in a perfect world, these reports, as they're done, should be redacted and put online because they are public information.
Right.
So we shouldn't have to ask for them. I think police departments, if they want to tout the integrity of the system, should be doing this on their own. Our group shouldn't have to do this to help the public. The police department should be doing this, on their own.
Right.
If you have an ethically run police department, and you should have no issue putting these reports out.
No, it seems remarkably straightforward. In fact, an ethically run police department would want to put these out.
Exactly.
Because if, in fact, they're acting in good faith, and there's largely an absence of these, it creates a spirit of trust. I mean, the central issue, and it's been exacerbated by several factors: the war on drugs, right. The continued incursions in the right to bear arms, the continued attempts by government to ignore open meeting laws and ignore disclosures, the continuing attempts to frustrate people with requests. All of that speaks to an organization that has something to hide.
These organizations, I think, to a certain extent, enjoy working with it in secrecy because I believe they think that they, can get more done in that respect because they break some rules,
Play a little fast and loose.
Yeah, exactly. And that's playing fast and loose with my freedom.
Right.
And I don't enjoy that. And, And nobody should enjoy that. You shouldn't look at it, like the aspect that you said earlier. If I don't have anything to hide, what do I have to worry about?
Right.
That's problematic,
Right. And the trouble is, if we allow the barrier to be set or the standard to be set at a complete loss of freedom, which means incarceration, and not at the more subtle yet equally important steps leading up to that, then we leave ourselves defenseless. It's information. There's an expectation of privacy about someone's personal information. There should be no expectation of privacy with regard to people acting on behalf of government.
Exactly. And if you look at the history of criminal justice, you have Blackstone's Law,
right,
which I think would basically stated something to the effect of it's better to see 10 guilty men be found innocent than one innocent man be found guilty.
Right.
And I've even had this conversation with an internal affairs investigator from Pawtucket a while back, and he laughed at me. He said, when was that written? That's the foundation of criminal justice, It's like they're so accustomed to breaking the rules and violating civil liberties to get what they want, these fishing expeditions, that it's just become second nature, and it's
Well, and they would rationalize that, and I think I'm being kind here, with quote-unquote a greater good. And when we allow, particularly, what is most egregious to me is when we allow those incursions, those violations, those rationalizations to take place when in fact it's civil or victimless crimes.
Right. Which most of them are.
Right. We mission creep, and this is the problem with government in general. Why someone like myself is moving ever more towards becoming an anarchist is that government never operates in stasis, if you will. Government always seeks, it is of human nature, to engage in what I affectionately refer to as mission creep. Makes it sound really innocuous. But mission creep goes from, I'm going to protect basic property rights, to, I'm going to start interpreting the behavior of someone prior to an actual violation of property rights as potentially leading up to property rights. And that gives me the right then to harass / attack / arrest / criminalize / fill in the blanks of those people's behavior. And that's how it starts. Inch by inch, slowly I creep.
Well, that's good. I mean, and that's the whole basis of personal responsibility. If you don't take the personal responsibility for keeping government in check, that is exactly what happens. And it's, history has proven that this is just governments come and the governments go, and revolutions come and revolutions go, and it's always the same issue. Government gets way too powerful, and lackadaisical people allow this to happen, and to their own doom.
Right, because ultimately they will come to get you.
It's eventual. It's going to happen.
Right, and what's fascinating to me about this particular moment in history is that within the quote-unquote first world, there are clear evidences of that. If you look towards what happened in Spain last year, this time last year, you had the spectacle of Spanish military firing on Spanish citizens because they sought to disassociate from the Spanish government. Venezuela, of course, is the most extreme example, but it's happening.
There's forced slavery in Venezuela now.
Right. It's actually happening. This is not some, this is not some dystopic movie or a series of novels set to entertain the wishes of 13-year-olds that are brought to the big screen. This is happening.
Yeah, I think, the attitude for most people is it couldn't happen here. They're just so disassociated with history and, how these problems play out that they don't pay attention. They think it couldn't happen here, and it slowly creeps up, and then one day it slaps you right in the face.
Right, and we've got police departments, municipal police departments in this state that have become militarized.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
And we've seen it recently, them playing with their toys.
The state police, we recently had an incident that, was... The state police have a Bearcat tank. Well, it's a SWAT vehicle.
Yeah.
And someone sent us a picture of the SWAT vehicle in Pawtucket, and it had the Punisher logo on a big plaque on the front. Mm-hmm. And the minute I saw that, I was bothered by it. I'm a comic book guy when I was a kid,
Well, and explain the Punisher.
The Punisher logo, basically the Punisher is judge, jury, and executioner. Mm-hmm. He was an ex-cop. He basically became a vigilante, and handled things on his own outside of the law.
Right.
Judge, jury, and executioner. And to put that on a police vehicle, it's very telling. It explains the mindset that you see with some of these guys. I wrote a letter to the state police showing them a picture of the vehicle, and I explained that I wasn't happy with it. Basically, I think I put a quote in from the creator of Punisher, who explained that he had even written an article about this. not too long ago. Basically, he wasn't a fan of law enforcement using the Punisher logo himself.
Right, because his image, and this is actually a recurring issue. I've Googled this. This is not the first. There's a recurring issue from people co-opting even though it might be, as they say in some quarters, a graphic novel. You and I are age where we call it comics.
Right.
But, there are nuances to the Punisher series which just happen to be displayed in a graphic format as opposed to the written word.
Right.
And there are real questions in that series about the rights and roles and responsibilities of citizens, the rights and roles and obligations of government, where they cross, where they intersect, criminal justice. I mean, it's not a. We ain't talking Archie here.
Right. And it's totally out of the scope of law enforcement. I mean, to give the state police credit, they handled the situation. Mm-hmm. They, I believe, they reprimanded whoever put that on the vehicle, and they took it off. I've seen pictures of that vehicle now. It just, it's been removed. Mm-hmm. It's small things like that, but that's, those are the things that people look at and you say, well, you're just being a pain in the ass. It's not. These are serious issues. If you allow that mentality to continue without someone being notified that that's a problem, that mentality spreads.
Yeah. No, it's, that sort of cowboy approach to law enforcement, it's contagious.
Yeah, it spreads. Yep.
Right, and when you look at now the militarization of our police department as an indirect result of the war in the Middle East, surplus equipment being just, you'll hear me time and time again point to the second Federal Justice Department report on Ferguson, Missouri. The first one obviously talked about the events of the riots. The second one talked about the mood of the community, its relationship with law enforcement, and the militarization of the police department as precipitative factors in the events leading up to and then happening in Ferguson, Missouri. It wasn't an overnight clash. It never is. It takes years for these type of tensions to build up.
Some of the militarized photos from that whole incident were unbelievable. I mean, we had men with tanks everywhere. This problem dates to the fact post 9/11 when the Department of Homeland Security basically joined itself with local law enforcement. So now that blending there with the Department of Homeland Security and local law enforcement is where they get these surplus military weapons. Basically it's the war on terror that they're using as an excuse to militarize local police departments with surplus military equipment. I mean, I remember at one point I was reading that they were getting hand grenades. They had to return some of this stuff. It was so outrageous. Mm-hmm. I mean, I believe at one point they were getting hand grenades. Oh, you know what it was they had received? Bayonets. What is a local police department going to do with a bayonet?
Well, and these grotesque purchases of mass quantities of ammunition.
Yeah, right.
So, what's the next step here? You folks, you're taking a two-pronged approach as a press release, and we put this press release out there everywhere. You've got this two-pronged approach. On one hand, you're fighting it in court. You're going to the Rhode Island Supreme Court. Any idea when that will actually take place?
I think we'll know whether the Rhode Island Supreme Court accepts the appeal sometime in September.
Right. And by the way, this is case law. We like to use the word established law now. On the backs of the taxpayers, we are now going to use valuable resources to fight this when this has already been vetted in court at the highest level of Rhode Island courts twice already.
Well, I mean, I'll be honest. I think this is a concerted effort to keep the Rhode Island Accountability Project from growing its database and
right.
and maybe putting stuff out there that they don't want out there. This is, I'll be totally honest. I think the decision, this is my opinion by the way, the decision by Peter Kilmartin in Piscanoff versus Narragansett was just, a dubious argument that they made, tried to make this distinction between internally generated and citizen generated reports as a way just to slow down the growth of the project and the amount of files that I would be receiving. I mean, to make an example out of this is all it would take to stop an internal affairs report that was, going to be, let's say there's and this example happened in Pawtucket, that's why I'm going to give it, right? There was a videotape of a police officer sleeping in his car, and somebody had taken it, they'd put it on Facebook, it had made the rounds, and the police department did an internal investigation of that incident. Now, according to the law, the way they've decided at this point, we can't get that report. We can't see, what happened. If a citizen would have put that report in, the minute he saw it on Facebook and put in his own complaint, that would have been released. See, the logic of that is ridiculous. And in Superior Court, when the case first went to Superior Court, the Pawtucket lawyer, the Pawtucket Police Union lawyer, Mr. Penza, made the argument. Originally, they were saying that we couldn't get any internally generated reports. Once we got to court, they kind of changed their tune a bit, and they said, we believe that some internally generated reports may be public, but some others aren't because they are HR related.
Right.
And then he went on to argue that these HR related reports could be a uniform violation or a haircut violation. Now, if you listen to that and you say to yourself, how ridiculous is it? Who cares about a haircut violation or a uniform violation? Once that's redacted, you have no idea who it is to begin with, so why are they even worried about this? It basically exposes their argument as, being bogus. They're worried about the other reports. They're not, worried about a haircut violation or a uniform violation. It's just disingenuous argument. And he said that in court. That's what struck me. When I heard that, and I'm not an attorney, so I can't interpret the Access to Public Records Act as well as my attorney or Steve Brown. But the layman can hear that and he'll know right off the bat that this is just nonsense.
Or as the band once said, Radio Gaga.
Yes. Nonsense, total.
Where can people find the site?
It's the Rhode Island Accountability Project.com. There's a database there. Basically, we have approximately 2/3 of all the cities and towns in Rhode Island up. They may not have a lot of files up. Some towns may only have 10 or 20 files up. Some towns have 2 or 3 years worth. Pawtucket, I think we have 3 years. Providence, I'm putting up right now. I actually won a complaint with the Attorney General. Providence, they did some fudging with my APRA request, and they ended up having to give me 8 months worth of internal affairs reports. Those will be up very soon.
I'm shocked.
Yes.
Shocked. Yeah, we have a saying here, the coalition in the halls of justice, justice in the halls. Because what it really comes down to is people's attention span is so short. In fact, I call Rhode Island politics short attention span theater. That once an issue goes into, as the Vincent A. Buddy Cianci used to say, into the vapors, it's forgotten by the next, as I mentioned to Stephen Brown, you've got this hideous, constant battle of what I call civil liberties whack-a-mole. The news cycle goes by, people forget. People forget about a situation in Pawtucket where the police officer decked a kid, and he just coincidentally had been involved in a situation by a mutual friend of ours who is a free citizen, former member of the United States military, who had his gun taken from him as he stood on his front lawn. Is thoroughly illegal, thoroughly registered.
Qualified immunity.
Yep. That happens all the time.
And qualified immunity, I believe, there was another case that just came in that strengthened it even more. It's a problem. We're creating we're fostering a disconnect between law enforcement and the people with this idea of qualified immunity and special rights, special privileges, where they don't have to follow the law like everyone else. It's problematic, and it's
creating nothing less than two classes of citizenry. You're creating. I'll leave you with this thought, because we're going to have you back again in a few weeks, and we're going to continue to cover this and continue to cover the Accountability Project. One of the if you're of a certain age, you remember the pre-breakup Brezhnev era of Soviet Russia. Okay, of course. What could possibly be the similarities? As a student of history, I see a distinct one, and that's the creation of a second class of people, what I call the true 1%. And the true 1% in Rhode Island, in old Soviet version of Russia, they called it apparatchik. An apparatchik was essentially a government operative, whether he be part of the bureaucracy or be part of the police state, who was entitled to special financial privileges, special voting privileges, special legal privileges. In a sense, they operated in an alternative reality in Russia. The roots of that are here. We protect our law enforcement community from the same travails that you and I would face. Government employees, and I'm not taking shots at the guy who's doing laundry at Zamorano. I'm talking about the six-figure appointees by the current regime who enjoy a very special, very protected life, while the rest of the state literally sinks financially around us. And that can not simply be allowed to happen.
I agree. Well, we'll keep fighting.
Well, listen,
We're not
congratulations.
giving up. Not going away anytime soon.
Well, listen, you're a patriot. You're a civil liberty warrior. You are there's a lot of work, you know.
Thank you. I appreciate that coming from you, Pat.
No, there's a tremendous. Folks see you online occasionally. You're too busy, but folks see you online occasionally discussing the issue. They see you perhaps on a show like this, or they read about you in the headlines, and they say, "Okay, so this guy, an hour or so." The sheer physical labor involved, the mental work that has to be done to maintain the project cannot even be remotely discounted. It is a commitment that is constant. It is a commitment that has put you square in the eye of the law enforcement community of the state. For a few, in a positive way. For a lot, they see you as a challenge to their authority. Of course, that's the whole point. And your willingness to take that on personally is something that is a bridge that is way too far for most citizens. And to your earlier remark,
Personal responsibility.
if you leave it up to the few that do, what happens one day when they can't?
More people need to take the personal responsibility to do this stuff on their own. If you love freedom, that's what you'll do. If you don't care, just go along. Just let it railroad itself right down the hill, because that's where we're going.